Hey there, I'm Dr. Beau Beard, and today I'm talking about something that I struggle with. Are you an athlete? Am I an athlete? Why do I have to have this label? Why do we have to have any labels nowadays? A lot of things have changed since I was a kid, honestly. Definitely in the last century. So let's break this down. So I'm just going to use my own experience for this, whatever you want to say it is, an explanation of how I think we can motivate people to incorporate more movement and exercise into their daily life. So when I was a kid, there were kids that were deemed athletes. There were kids that were deemed non-athletes, but most kids, even at a young age, so like grade school, all the way through grade school, I would say it would be less likely to not be doing athletic things. So what I mean by that, even though there were people that were standouts in which we still had the presidential fitness test or presidential physical fitness test, there were people that were standouts, but for the most part, there were only a few kids that couldn't do a few of the things and very rare that couldn't do any of the things. Nowadays, they've had to remove that test altogether because nobody would pass for the general, masses. And then beyond that, kids were still playing outside a ton. And this, I know sometimes this can feel like I walked both ways uphill in the snow to school, old timer stuff, but it's definitely changed. So nowadays, technology has taken a different place in our lives. I'm speaking to you through a social media platform right now. So obviously I use these things to my advantage and hopefully your advantage as you're learning. But it's a different concept now for a kid to think that they're an athlete, or an adult, which we're going to get to here in a second, to think they're an athlete. So when I was a kid, if you were an athlete, it meant you were athletic, right? You were a good athlete overall, not a good baseball player, not a good basketball player. Now you may pick your sport, but you still had plenty of off seasons. You may practice something year round. But we were just far more well-rounded. And I've said this before, but I can't remember. Maybe I just don't remember. I can't remember anybody ever being injured or out of play unless they actually had an injury, right? They sprained an ankle, they got hit with a ball, they hurt themselves doing something else outside of that sport. I don't remember anybody going to PT or physical therapy, chiropractor, or whatever it was, for chronic injuries, for non-contact injuries, for the plethora of things that I see a lot of kids nowadays that I just don't think is normal for that population. Now, fast forward to today, and this has been not just today, I would say definitely the last 5 years, but definitely maybe even in the last decade, that to call yourself an athlete as a child means that you're almost turning yourself into a mini professional. And Dr. James Andrews has been quoted on this, that, professionalization of youth sports is probably the biggest determinant of injuries, that we think that we're going to get kids to specialize early. That's going to make them better at their sport, more likely to get scholarships. So it becomes a money game. And then ideal world, maybe they'll be a pro athlete. And I mean, this is crazy stuff that our kids aren't into yet, but that, little league teams will have tournaments where pro scouts are there. And some of these are sponsored in one way or another by pro teams where there's a tournament over in Georgia where all pro teams will have a scout present. We're talking 10 to 12-year-old boys that are playing here. I mean, this is craziness. So now to be an athlete means you're a mini pro, or you're on your way to be a pro, that maybe you're not that you wouldn't necessarily be athletic to be a good baseball player, but just because you're a good baseball player does not necessarily mean you're a good athlete. It doesn't mean you're well-rounded. It doesn't mean you move well. In particular, let's say that I'm a pitcher and I don't hit. All I do is pitch. Like, you could be hyper specialized at a young age and actually completely tears you apart because you're not a robust, durable organism that's ready to take on the rest of the world, both definitely physically, maybe emotionally and mentally, as some of those things play out in youth sports nowadays. Now, moving into kind of my dilemma, and I think a lot of people's dilemmas. So when I went through, high school and college, I was an athlete and thought of myself as an athlete, but maybe not to even the extent that like I have trouble with it now today. So I think I had a lot of unfinished business where I felt like I should have done more athletic things at an earlier age, right? And I had a pretty bad injury at an early age. And then I think I had something to prove in the movement and exercise realm, because I still to this day have a titanium rod in my femur. But now that I, for the past well over a decade, have been into running and trail racing in particular, when I first got into it, I was lucky that I started having success, won some races, things like that. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, I'm a trail runner. Well, I'm a competitive trail runner. And as I got into that mindset, I kind of picked on myself. I was like, that's not good. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not an athlete. Like, you're a chiropractor, you're a husband, you're a regular dude. Why are you not okay being that just guy, right? Or gal, or whatever it is. And then you see that, the boon of racing and events, right? Obstacle course racing, trail racing. I think 3 years ago, the stat, I don't know the current stat, trail races have grown in 2018, I believe, by 435% over the previous year. And I mean, every way that we can compete in these things is coming for adult athletes or adult active people. And I really beat that up for a while, kind of saying, like, why do we have to have something to compete for to be active and exercise? It seems like, can't you just do it for your health? Well, there's another piece of this that is kind of like, well, what are you going to do with your health, right? Are you going to, just have this plastic wrapped mint condition health? Like, you're just going for, I'm going to be perfect. I'm trying to maintain. I want to live as long as I can. I don't want to get hurt. Or are you looking at this as like progress versus perfection? And I think if you have progress, you have to have like milestones, you have to have achievements, you have to have goals. It's hard to set a goal to be like, I want to still be healthy when I'm 60. Because, like, what's that mean, right? And if you listen to any of Peter Attia's kind of centenarian Olympics, he says that, determine what you want to do when you're 100. So for him, it's like lift I think it's a 20 or 40 pound suitcase over and do an overhead bend, be able to pick up a child, get up and down off the floor without assistance, like things like that. And then work backwards every decade from there. So when you're 60, maybe you have to be able to lift 100 pounds overhead and pick up 3 kids or whatever it is. But I think beyond that, like, humans for a long time, like, play was a huge part of social structure. So, which, looked like, stickball, and, that's Native Americans really are the early inventors of things like lacrosse and things like that, like, not only were these ways to socially interact in a movement realm, but also they allowed us to display skills that were necessary for survival at those times. So a lot of the things that were early sports, right? Like, throwing a heavy implement, wrestling, all these really early sports had some sort of tie to, well, is that a skill that can keep me alive or keep me from dying out in the real world? We just don't see a lot of those ties anymore, right? It's very hard to correlate how getting a ball through a hoop or, catching a ball in the end zone is going to like keep you alive. But really that's what sports are displaying in essence, right? Is kind of genetic, I hate to say it, this is going to sound terrible, like genetic or athletic prowess over somebody else, which is the whole competitive, survival of the fittest. And if you don't even want to take that realm, well, then take it back to that social construct, that's how we really jive with one another, is, that can even be dance, right? I mean, a ballet dancer or ballerina is definitely an athlete for sure. But we used to do a lot more of these things socially, and we didn't have to, if we did have a competition, like think of the Tarahumara who have been doing running competitions for a long time. But these have a lot less emphasis on who's winning in the competition itself, right? Are you going to compete in this? Everybody's doing it. So I've kind of come full circle on the fact that for me, that I don't beat up the idea of wanting to be an athlete, because I think that's better than not wanting to be an athlete nowadays, right? Even though some people definitely overdo it, right? Ultra endurance sports, not always the greatest thing. It kind of gets into this hedonistic calendaring, right? Like, got to make sure you're not doing too much of this stuff so you don't tear yourself down. But also, I just think that maybe this mindset will kind of pay dividends of, we live in a very comfortable, squishy, soft world. Sometimes we call those people that are a little too soft, like we'll call them bitch babies. it's not meant to be mean. If you've ever watched the show Scandal or ABC, I think their writers had a hot take moment, and that's where that comes from. So this whole anti-bitch baby movement would be, maybe it's better to go do hard stuff every once in a while. So we still have that in our life. And if we have to falsely conjure it through athletic competition and creating, uncomfortable and distress and stress and challenge and heartache and loss and failure and winning through athletic competition, I would much rather have that be the platform than to not have it at all. So my dilemma now is, why do I feel like I have to be an athlete to be active? And to me, it kind of gets into, it's a motivator to me to be competitive in these arenas, but I'm not going to be able to be competitive forever. So I also have to come to a realization at some point that, okay, what happens when I can't win a race anymore, or I can't finish in the top 10, or I can't run the times I used to? Well, are you always competing with the younger version of yourself? Or there obviously is your age group moves up, you're competing within that age group. But I just think you have to find challenge, whatever platform or whatever shape or form that takes. We need a lot more of that nowadays. We need to do hard things. We need to do things that push us to the limit, because it just doesn't happen, and that's how you grow. So I don't want my kids to be mini professional athletes. I want them to be athletes. I want them to be athletic. Choose what they want to do based on what challenges them or what is fun, what they enjoy. But at the end of the day, also realizing that like the platform of sport and athletics is one where we learn a lot of life lessons without dire consequences. And that's also what it provided, historically, is that versus being in a battle or, doing something that had life or death consequences, that we put it in the arena of, hey, this is sport, this is athletics. Let's see what you can do here without having an arrow shot at you, sword thrust into your chest. So if you identify with being an athlete, I've come full circle. Like, pat yourself on the back. I identify as that now. That makes me sound like I'm identifying as a pronoun. Athlete. Is that going to be a new pronoun? Athlete. So go do something hard. If that's a competition, so be it. Watch the early specialization and professionalism of sports with your kids. And besides that, I will see you on the next video.